Our top stories.
Tonight, the Syria missile strike fallout continues to damage the Trump administration, as most of the president's supporters do not want military intervention or a regime change in Syria. Meanwhile, the leader of the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia says Moscow should carry out retaliatory strikes against the United States. And now reports are coming in that China has just deployed 150,000 troops to the North Korea border, as the world moves closer to a deadly conflict between superpowers. All that plus much more up next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
The reason InfoWars Live has 5-star ratings on major third-party sites is because I want products I'm going to use for my family. I take this, my family takes this, and then it funds the operation with the most hardcore, truthful information you're going to find anywhere. So what you find in our news is the same thing you find in our products at InfoWarsLive.com.
If I ever forget to take them, I have a noticeable difference. I don't feel good. The nascent iodine is one of the ones that was life-changing for me.
Yeah, I actually have just run out of my super female. I had a few bottles at my house, and I've been taking it again, hitting the gym once again. Very exciting, feeling great, looking good. So, and I know my hair is luxurious once again. So obviously the super female is amazing. I love it.
Nascent iodine is essential. Survival Shield X2. If there's one product that I would say is life-changing that I would suggest, it's Nascent iodine Survival Shield X2. It's got a 5-star rating.
It's a win-win. InfoWarsLive.com.
You know, there's been a lot of motivations put forth for why we would do the kind of actions that we saw in the Middle East, the 180-degree turn that we've seen from Donald Trump. And I think one of the things that we need to look at is, of course, the domestic context. Remember that George H.W. Bush campaigned on read my lips, no new taxes. He was emphatic about it. He repeated it all the time. He said the Democrats are going to say raise your taxes, and he's going to say I'm going to say read my lips, no new taxes. 2 years into his administration, what did he do? He gave us the largest tax increase we had ever had at that point in time. And if you go back to the Wayback Machine, take a look at this Time magazine article, they point out that he was asked to clarify his position as he was jogging in St. Petersburg baseball park, and he pointed to his rear end and said, read my hips. Okay, we knew that he wasn't really going to do that. We hoped that he had learned something from seeing the tax cuts and the effects that they'd had with the Reagan administration. He'd called it, when he was running against Ronald Reagan, voodoo economics. He said, you think that you're going to grow the economy by taking away tax cuts or by giving people tax cuts? No, you grow the economy by taking away people's money, don't you, right? That's the globalist plan of raising taxes. And so he called it voodoo economics to say that we could get growth from tax cuts. And so we had hoped that he might have learned something in 8 years, but no, he didn't. So that's why he was very emphatic about that and then turned his back. Now, the lesson is that he became a one-term president. And now already, because of the issues that we've seen in terms of Obamacare and what's coming up in taxes, we now see this article from The Hill, midterm threatens the GOP House majority. They say Republicans control both the House and the Senate. That may go away at the midterm elections just coming up, less than 2 years away, if they can't do something, if they can't get a tax plan together, if they can't repeal Obamacare. And again, we look at what's happening with the taxes. As AP points out, Trump has scrapped the tax plan that he campaigned on, just like he scrapped the idea that he's going to repeal the structure of Obamacare. You cannot use dictatorial powers given to the Health and Human Services Secretary to fix Obamacare, because the next guy that comes in is going to make it as bad, if not worse. You can't leave that structure there. The structure has to be repealed, or you're not going to have anything that's really fixed. And the same thing is true when we look at tax situation. They say administration officials have signaled that they want to pass tax legislation with only Republican votes. They could, and if they don't, they're going to lose their majority. And we'll see Trump possibly become a one-term president. Yet, they've also held listening sessions with House Democrats. They say the goal is to cut taxes sharply enough to improve the economic picture in depressed and rural and industrial pockets of the country where many Trump voters live. But the administration so far has swatted down alternative ways for raising revenue, such as the carbon tax. This is the AP talking. So they're saying that somehow we have to have a carbon tax because, you know, we've got to somehow help these people in the rural areas. No, carbon tax is going to devastate us. It's not going to help anyone but the few billionaires that are going to live off of that. Who does that go to? Who do we pay our indulgences to for using energy? Well, we know where that's going to work out. And hopefully they will hold the line against that and we will have real tax reform. But when it comes to Obamacare, that is not looking as good. As we saw last week, they were talking about to revive the health bill, the GOP was going to add an Obamacare-like subsidy. As we pointed out, the problem with Obamacare, and it's a perfect model for the way our government is set up, it's a mixture of socialism and crony capitalism or economic fascism. They force us, with the economic fascism part, they force us to buy health insurance from their preferred providers, from the big business that supports them. And then they use the socialism aspect of it, the subsidy. And so when they talk about the fact that, and they use as a benchmark the number of uninsured people that we have out there, you have to understand this is a losing prospect. We were sold Obamacare. It was called the Affordable Health Care Act. But there's nothing that's going to make it affordable if it is universal. And that is the key thing that Donald Trump, key place, I think, where he went wrong, where he started saying, we're going to have health care for everybody. No, you can't. That is socialism. You can either try to have universal health care, and you can pretend that you're going to do it, and you'll wind up getting Venezuelan health care, or you can use market reforms, which is what he campaigned on. He had a very detailed 7-point plan to replace mandates with markets, to give people choices instead of holding a gun to their head, to give them the power to make those decisions. But then he starts talking about universal health care for everybody. You can pretend that that's going to work, but it's simply going to take us down the path that we've seen with every socialist country. You have to have a market system. That's the only thing that's going to make health care more affordable is a marketplace. And at that point, it makes it more accessible. You will never have utopia where everybody has a Cadillac health care plan. That just simply isn't going to happen. So the question is, how do we make it better? How do we make it more affordable? The conservatives went to the White House and they said, well, let's allow governors to opt out of some of the Obamacare regulations on the insurance industry. This is why the GOP is going to lose big time in the midterm elections, because even the conservatives are not pushing for a repeal. They're pushing for permission to get out of some of these mandates. That is the real issue. And yet, what happened? The centrists pushed back on this. Said, no, we are not going to let you apply for waivers to get out of this. And here's the way they put it today.
Putting the essential health benefits back in. So there were a lot of moderates did not like the fact that the essential health benefits were effectively coming out. So the fact that they're back in, and for a state to ask for a waiver on those, they have to also show where they're going to be improving coverage and reducing cost.
So you heard what he said. He said, we are not going to take out essential health benefits. Understand, that is code for mandates. They're saying these are essential. It is essential that men have to get pregnancy care, even if they are single. That's the kind of mandates that are making this unaffordable. And it's not even working out for the insurance companies. Remember, we reported last week that Knoxville is going to become the first place to have Obamacare completely fail because the last insurer is pulling out of there. That's Humana. Humana tried to do a merger with Aetna. Why? Because they're both losing big money off of Obamacare. So they decided if they can merge together, they'll become too big to fail and they'll get the government to bail them out. When the merger was taken down, Humana said, we're getting out. So they're going to get out in 2018. Doesn't that sound familiar? From 2013 to 2018. Just like every 5-year communist economic plan we've seen come out of the former Soviet Union, this 5-year economic plan is going to break down. And who's going to be holding the sack? It's going to be the Republicans, and they deserve to have this put around their neck as this thing breaks down. One other aspect, and that is, as Jerome Corsi points out, we now have a GOP senator, along with some other Democrats, continuing to try to prop up this fraud of Obamacare by stealing money from investors, by stealing money from Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Tennessee Republican Senator Bob Corker, derisively tagged as the senator from Wells Fargo by those who are fighting to recapitalize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is actively pushing President Trump to continue the Obama administration policy of sweeping Fannie and Freddie earnings to the Treasury Department. They sent out a letter on March the 29th. They rounded up 4 other U.S. senators, including Virginia Democrat Senator Mark Warner. And they wrote a letter to the Federal Housing Association. And this is what's called the net worth sweep. And of course, Jerome Corsi has reported about this in the past. It has stripped Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac of more than $260 billion since August of 2012. And he contrasts that to the money that was given to the banks, which was eventually paid back. And of course, they gave these banks zero interest loans from the Federal Reserve. They took the interest rate down. That may be one of the reasons why they're starting to pull it back up, besides bursting the bubble. And he said they got a 1.7% return on investment the federal government did when that was paid back, because, you know, the banks don't pay you too much interest when they set the rates, and they set the rates. But then he pointed out that this has been the largest theft of dividends, the amount of money that they have swept out. That's the nice term, a net worth sweep. Okay, that's what they call the theft. Okay, the bank robbery of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to subsidize Obamacare, the largest theft of dividends in corporate history. So the whole thing is a lie. The whole thing is based on redistribution of income. And that is why it's going to fail. It is the same model that we've seen in the former Soviet Union as well as Venezuela. Now, as we look at that, that's another one of the aspects, not just the Russian issues, not just trying to look impressive to the Chinese people, but also as a wag the dog to get people's minds away from the failures on domestic policy. And if the Republicans and Donald Trump do not deliver on tax cuts and on the repeal of Obamacare, if they just do a head fake on that, the American people are going to throw them out. They pushed 24 times the Keystone Pipeline bill while Obama was president, knowing that he would veto that every time, and he did. They never even tried to get rid of Obamacare, never put anything up. They knew that they weren't going to get anywhere with the Keystone Pipeline, but they kept trying. But they never did try with Obamacare. They never had a plan to repeal Obamacare. Donald Trump did. He had a detailed plan of putting a market in place to allow us to actually do something to control costs. You can't just rob Peter and pay Paul and think that somehow you're going to get affordable health care. It's going to get more and more expensive. So this is the health care debacle that they are now owning. Rand Paul pointed out that as long as we have a situation where we are using the kinds of rhetoric that John McCain and, as he points out, his ilk, we're not going to have a solution in Syria. He said anybody who wants to talk to Putin about a political settlement, about helping Assad go away, anybody who wants to talk about that, myself included, will be called by the McCains of this world a friend of Vladimir Putin. And of course, that's not hyperbole. We saw that idiotic statement from John McCain as well, just over the idea of adding Montenegro as a dependent to NATO. If you even want to discuss this, if you even want to hold a discussion in the Senate about whether or not that should happen, you are a friend of Vladimir Putin. And then he called Rand Paul a friend of Vladimir Putin for that. And he went on to say, so long as we have that kind of stupidity involved in the debate, it makes it very hard to get to what many thinking people have said, that the answer in Syria is ultimately a political solution. We are not going to see much of that. But of course, Russia has its own John McCains. And that's one of the things that is so concerning about this whole issue, is that when you start firing missiles and wag the dog scenarios and you start engaging the superpowers in doing this, at least when Bill Clinton did this, when he fired his 75 Tomahawk cruise missiles to distract attention from his domestic issues with Monica Lewinsky and the sexual issues there. And of course, Ken Starr worked for him to move that away from rape and sexual assault to lying and committing perjury about an illicit affair. So Ken Starr really covered for him even more than the swag the dog issue. But when he did it, at least he shot his missiles at Afghanistan and Sudan. He didn't go out and take on the superpowers of Russia and China. That is what is so ill-considered about this movement to become the policeman of the world again, in contradiction of what Donald Trump campaigned for. And we see now a Russian politician calling for retaliatory strikes. They have their own John McCain's as well. The leader of the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, has called for Moscow to carry out retaliatory strikes against the U.S. in response to the Trump administration's airstrikes on Syria. And then even more troubling, this news out of South Korea. The South Korean paper, the Korean news agency Chosun, said the Chinese army has deployed about 150,000 troops to the North Korean border in 2 groups to prepare for unforeseen circumstances. The reason, they say, the prospect of military options, such as a preemptive strike on North Korea, like the one the U.S. just launched on Syria. You see, when you have a meeting and you start it with a massive $100 million fireworks display, or as some people pointed out, Donald Trump lit his cigars with a $100 million bunch of cruise missiles to impress the Chinese president. Did he really impress him? Yes, he did. I think he did. Did he make him think that he was strong? I think he showed the Chinese president that he was unpredictable, that he was erratic, that you couldn't tell exactly what he was going to do. And then Donald Trump sent more messages that got a lot of applause from all the people who have reliably opposed him, all the neocons, the globalists, the Wall Street investors, the Bill Kristols, the Elliott Abrams, the John McCains. All those people loved exactly what he did, and so he stepped up. Because, you know, when you're on a roll, let's roll with it. So we're going to send a nuclear-powered Calvinist carrier class to ship to Singapore, that whole battle group. The Chinese army now, in response to that carrier being sent to the Korean Peninsula, has now sent 150 troops in 2 groups. So that's the way these things go. See, we're not really playing 4D chess. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. This is not 4D chess. This is simply a game of Risk, or a game of Monopoly, if you want to take a look at the other issues in the area. Of course, as we've mentioned many times, the gas pipelines running through Syria. That's one of the reasons why they have to have regime change. Of course, the other part of regime change that is necessary is to create war and chaos and refugees so they can import the war, the chaos, and the refugees to the United States and to the West. And we're seeing that in spades. Now, when we come back, we are going to play for you some of the consequences that we see happening in Iowa as we see the refugees that have come into there, and the puff piece that was done by CBS's 60 Minutes to try to distract everybody from some of the real issues that are happening in that area. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And it's time for humanity to stand up in the InfoWar and say, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of this, but you want to fight, you better believe you got one. InfoWars has partnered with Defender Body Armor to bring you a new state-of-the-art line of advanced, highly tested body armor from InfoWarsStore.com. Defender Body Armor is certified to protect against all handgun rounds and even armor-piercing FN 5.7 pistol rounds. The secret to Defender Body Armor is its proprietary processing technology that disperses more kinetic energy at a rate higher than any other traditional body armor, using one of the strongest synthetic materials ever created, called ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene. Defender Armor is also super compact and lightweight. There's a reason the Department of Defense chose Defender to manufacture their new line of advanced lightweight armor. It works. Defender Body Armor is made right here in America and has received the highest level ballistic resistance certification from an authorized NIJ ballistic laboratory. Defender Body Armor is now available through InfoWarsStore.com, so you can defend yourself, your family, and finance the info war against the globalists all at the same time. A total 360 win.
You provided Alex with the caveman.
Well, so we've been formulating this stuff for a while, and we've been getting these different flavors, and, you know, oh, I don't know about this one, you know, and so I've been taking that stuff, and I'm an old man. I'm 42. I work out 5 times a week, if not more.
I hear you're okay in jiu-jitsu. That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
No, I'm not. I'm terrible. I'm terrible. But the point is that I have a lot of aches and shoulders and, you know, there's weird joint stuff that I've had issues with for years. And this bone broth, the caveman bone broth, along with our joint formula, has just worked magic for me. And that's just, that's just from my personal experience. I think they're great products, and I think if anybody else has those issues, that you should definitely, you owe it to yourself to check it out. If I'm wrong, then hey, man, write me a mean letter. But let me tell you, they work for me. And so,
yeah, they work for me too. We were talking about this earlier. Dude and I play basketball, and I'm just now, like, for the first time in my life, I'm 27 now. After I play basketball, my knees are barking. Like it's
Well,
but the bone broth and the joint formula, like you just said, you combine those two. I felt the difference immediately. I felt it immediately.
Yeah, and it actually tastes good. Like, I'm really picky, and I will drink it. It tastes good to me. I love chocolate, so I really like the flavor of the caveman. So, if the bone broth, if the bone broth is really that gross, I would never have known because it tastes really good. And my favorite is the Super Female Vitality. So ladies, get yourself some Super Female Vitality if you haven't already, because it just gets me going. I'll take a whole bunch of that stuff before I go out and do
get it for your wife then too,
yeah,
or girlfriend.
Right? I go and take a bunch of it before I go do man on the street, and I just start running, zipping around, running right into the action. No fear, nothing. So,
well, that's a big primary part about fighting the globalists, is making sure that we stay healthy and stay clear-eyed and stay honest and stay humble. I hope that we do that here at InfoWars. We got a lot going on, and we're in the middle of the fight, so we really appreciate it when anybody supports us, either by purchasing our products, or you can even go onto our store and donate. We're doing this by the skin of our teeth. I know it looks like we're in a $1 billion studio, but Alex has never taken 1 cent of borrowed money at all whatsoever. This is all money that's come from you, the listeners. So you have literally built this place, built this place with your compassion, and built this place with the support that you've sent us. So from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it, because I know we wouldn't be able to do this, and we wouldn't have a voice if it wasn't for you. So once again, we got to thank the listeners for their steadfastness in supporting us. And even when we make mistakes, and even when we're not right, and even when we might go a little bit crazy, you guys stick with us, and I appreciate that.
Well, Susan Rice is under fire once again. She's actually getting 4 Pinocchios for some claims that she made back in January. Rice actually claimed on this Syria chemical weapons to NPR News that the Obama administration was able to get the Syrian government to voluntarily and verifiably give up its chemical weapons stockpile. Now, of course, we've seen the results of last week's attack. Whether or not the Syrian government was truly involved in this remains to be seen. Of course, there was no independent investigation done. However, they are tying the Syrian government to this latest chemical weapons attack, which means that once again, the Obama administration oversold what it was able to do there, what it was able to accomplish there with the Syrian government. Now, when Susan Rice talks about the Obama administration's solution, was she alleging to the agreement that sources told InfoWars the Obama administration was able to reach with the Assad regime, that they would work out a way for him to voluntarily step down rather than face the U.S. military? And now people are saying that Assad has reneged on that deal, which is why we see President Trump getting in there with those airstrikes to just kind of remind him about that little deal that he made, and letting him know that there's kind of a new sheriff in town who's not going to be drawing any red lines. Now, according to this fact checker, the Washington Post fact checker gives the former National Security Advisor a rating of 4 Pinocchios, which is the worst rating on their truth scale. And the Post writes, the reality is that there were continued chemical weapons attacks by Syria. And this is, of course, after another fact-checking by PolitiFact retracted its mostly true rating from a 2014 claim from then Secretary of State John Kerry that 100% of those weapons were removed from Syria. So this is all very interesting. And of course, this is a story that remains to be alive here as they have to continually roll it out to push their new narrative. It'll be very interesting to see how Google's new fact check deals with all of these retractions that they're going to have to issue when it doesn't suit their narrative.
And again, Leanne says that that's not been investigated. So we're told by the Washington Post that it gets 4 Pinocchios. We're also having this push by Fox News and the Washington Post article. They look at James Clapper, a known liar. So who do we trust? Do we trust the Washington Post? Do we trust James Clapper, Fox News? Look at the data, not necessarily even the source, because here we don't really have any trustworthy sources. They're backing this on the idea that, of course, we wouldn't have struck this Syrian base if it wasn't a chemical gas attack from the Syrian government. So they're working backwards on this. Now, last week, as soon as this happened, there was an article on Liberty Blitz that was from Consortium News talking about intelligence analysts expressing concern over Trump's wag the dog moment. And they specifically talked about a former CIA officer, Philip Giraldi, who reported hearing from his intelligence contacts in the field that they were shocked at how the new poison gas story was being distorted by Trump and the mainstream news media. He said that there was a lot of anger within the intelligence community over the distortion of intelligence to justify Trump's military retaliation. It was so great that some covert officers were considering going public. He said they're astonished at how this is being played by the administration and the U.S. media. I'm going to read you an article that we have at InfoWars.com today from perhaps somebody like that. But before I do, I want to point out one more thing when we look at trustworthy media sources. One of the people selling this, of course, is the New York Times. On Friday, they published a lead story by Michael R. Gordon. Now, he is a neocon, and he was one of the guys who, back in 2002, sold the idea of the aluminum tube story to say that Saddam Hussein was involved in a nuclear weapons program. That was obviously false, yet the guy's still working at the New York Times, and now he's pushing the next war, which, as many people have pointed out, looks exactly like this buildup to the Iraq War. Instead of talking about weapons of mass destruction, they've got a new term that they talk about just so you don't see too much of the similarity that's going there. But let's look at what one possible person, this says this is authored under a pseudonym by a high-level source. This story that we have at InfoWars.com, Donald Trump is an international lawbreaker. And they say this because it is an unjustified attack on a sovereign country. Let me ask you if this is an act of war or not. Many people, when I talk about the fact that we needed to take our time, we were not under an emergency threat to be attacked by Syria. We had time to take a close look at what was going on, to have this forensic evidence shown. That's one of the reasons why the founders had the Congress as a deliberative body decide whether or not we're going to commit an act of war. See, back in the day when this country was founded, war was conducted on a very close basis. You looked the person you were killing in the eye in most cases, stuck them with a bayonet, killed them hand to hand. They wanted to make sure that horror was not taken lightly. Now, Donald Trump sees pictures of people dying. They don't usually see pictures of the people that die with their actions. And that was a very shaking picture for him. But we need to have an investigation. We needed to take our time. Instead, we didn't do that. We just shot the missiles into another country. We attacked their military base. If somebody attacked an American military base that wasn't even in our country, do you think we would say that's an act of war? What if that military base was in our country? Yes, it would be an act of war. Now, this is what the source said. He said 5 things. He said the Russians briefed the U.S. on the proposed target. He said this is a process that started more than 2 months ago. There's dedicated phone lines being used to coordinate and deconflict. In other words, they don't want to have Russian and U.S. Hitting each other, colliding or shooting missiles at each other. That now, I think, has been gone. I think the Russians said they're going to take that away. Number 2, the U.S. was fully briefed on the fact that there was a target there that the Russians believed was a weapons and explosives depot for Islamic rebels. They went on to say the Syrian Air Force hit that target with conventional weapons. All involved expected to see a massive secondary explosion, but that didn't happen. Instead, chemical smoke, began billowing from the site. It turns out the Islamic rebels used that site to store chemicals, not sarin. The chemicals included organic phosphates, chlorine, that they followed the wind and they killed civilians. Number 4, there was a strong wind blowing that day. The cloud was driven to a nearby village and caused casualties. Number 5, how do we know that it was not sarin? Very simple. The so-called first responders handled the victims without gloves. If this had been sarin, they would have died. Sarin on the skin will kill you. Okay, that's the real issue. And so as he points out, is this the Gulf of Tonkin Part 2? You know, we had admissions that was a false flag. We know that was a false flag. In the fog of war, we had McNamara admit that he knew that it was false, but they went ahead and used that as a pretense for Vietnam. This is where we are, folks. And if you think that things are going to get any better, just take a look at some of the civil liberties issues that we're seeing violated here. You know, travel in the 21st century is getting more and more like a boot in the face. When we look at this video that surfaced of this person who was drug off of a plane, it's absolutely amazing. But that's what we're seeing on a regular basis. We're seeing people being required to do face scans before they can travel. And in this particular situation, they talk about how now the airport cop has been suspended, but of course he's just been put on leave. He's probably on leave with pay. Doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be removed. And the Chicago police had earlier said that the victim had just fallen. But then the video of other passengers surfaced and we saw what was really going on. And here's the outrageous thing. The high-handed attitude of the airplane companies in conjunction with the TSA. This is just this attitude. Like I said, it's a boot in the face when you're traveling. If you think it's going to get any better when they take over ground transportation, when they take over your cars, you got another thing coming. What they did was they started offering people, because they'd overbooked this flight, they offered them $400 in a hotel room. Nobody was taking it. They kept moving it up, as you've probably seen them do on a flight. It's a regular thing to overbook these flights. They got up to $800, and when nobody took them up on it, they simply went full Basil Fawlty on the person, okay? And they did this so they could fly their own people. Why wouldn't they keep going if they didn't get it for $800? I don't know, but at that point, they just start beating people. And if you want to see the double standard that we have here, take a look at this. The Washington Post points out the cost of Betsy DeVos's security detail is $8 million over 8 months. This is for a department that shouldn't even exist. The Department of Education. And this woman had to be called into the Oval Office with Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions because she didn't want to let go of the mandates about tranny bathrooms, and then said, I'll be watching your bathrooms. I'll be watching to see if there's any bullying going on here. And this is the same organization that demands veto power over your curriculum. That is where we're headed. This is the boot in your face. This is the kind of out-of-control government that we need to shut down. Stay with us. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about yogurt.
Why is the fungus? Why is the mold? Why is the yeast taking over? What is going on? What has changed? Dr. Group, the new product, will sell out definitely in days. You've been testing it for almost a decade. You've got rave reviews from your patients who've been taking it privately at your clinics. Myco ZX supports normal fungal and yeast balance, proprietary blend of herbs and enzymes made with high-quality ingredients. It's available at InfoWarsStore.com. We also have free shipping, orders $50 or more, and 10% off when you sign up for auto ship. Additionally, on top of that, and then you fund an organization dedicated to the truth and get something you and your family absolutely need. But you should consult your healthcare provider. This is not a game. This is not a joke, especially if you have really big yeast levels or fungus in your body. You know, there can be some responses to this as you're flushing it. But why is this product so powerful? What does it do?
So we've been doing research just like you have on what's currently going on. Obviously, we stay ahead of the game because our job is to protect and address the root cause of the problem, which is why I've been...
Now, we want stuff for our own kids.
This is why we've addressed the president, you know, let's address the root cause of America's health problems. But getting back to fungus, it's becoming an increasing epidemic that's only getting worse.
Killing bats everywhere, other animals, squirrels are dying.
Funguses were used as bioweapons.
So why is it suddenly killing so many mammals?
Yeah, fungus is a growing epidemic, and I've been testing this formula and making changes to this formula for over 10 years. I've had nobody... Here's the thing, Alex. When you go to the doctor with a list of symptoms, you can look at symptoms of fungus overgrowth in the body, It's going to show, you're going to pull up over 100 symptoms, everything from brain fog, lack of energy, insomnia, headaches, bowel problems.
Joint pain.
It's joint pain. It's linked to Crohn's disease.
Infertility.
Now.
What about the obesity epidemic? I know they test people that are really obese and like they're just colonized by fungus.
Yeast overgrowth. I have a study right here by Jacob Titelbaum at the Fibromyalgia and Fatigue Center in Dallas. Yeast overgrowth is linked to an average weight gain of 32.5 pounds. What doctor...
By the way, folks, look, I'm not bragging. We game changed the presidency. We game changed the New World Order. Globalism is falling because of you. You are the InfoWar. Listen, this is religious for me, okay? I do not bring you something unless I absolutely believe in it. And if we were reigned with $1 billion, I would turn 99% of it against the enemy. I want to defeat them. I'm ready to give my life. Everybody knows that, against the enemy. Please, we only have a limited supply of this. I want to get your reviews. I want to hear what you have to say. For me, it's been incredible. Myco ZX, antifungal, antifungus, anti-yeast. Get it today. Limited run. It'll be months till we get more. InfoWarsStore.com, InfoWarsLife.com. Myco ZX goes great with the bomb defense. InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. And you can't support an organization that isn't fighting hard. Look at the response we're getting. We were changing the world together. You are the InfoWar. God bless you all. Let's go to Debit in Florida. Debit in Florida, you're on the air.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. Listen, I have bought your product, and I gotta say they're amazing. Anyone who's on the fence, buy it, because I've got Caveman, Superman Vitality, Secret 12, Vitamin Mineral Fusion. I've got the body armor.
Wow, thank you.
Wow.
You're the type of listener that makes it all possible. Which nutraceutical does you like best?
I really like the Vitamin Mineral Fusion, to be honest. That's
amazing.
Really incredible. I drank it in the morning, and I swear to you, I felt incredible. Like I haven't felt weak. My morning was fantastic, and I love you guys. I love the InfoWars crew, and I just want to, I want to take this opportunity to tell anybody out there who's on the fence, just buy it. You will love it. I'm telling you, I've never bought a bad product.
What you find in our news is the same thing you find in our products at InfoWarsLife.com. It's a win-win. InfoWarsLife.com.
Yesterday, CBS 60 Minutes did a nice puff piece on a billionaire, the Chobani yogurt billionaire, who has made a big display of his practice of hiring refugees, talking about how successful that is. And, of course, one of the things they didn't want you to see, we're going to have a report from Leanne here in just a moment. They say this is a 5-year-old plant that is in deep red Idaho. Well, there's something else that happened 5 years ago they didn't want to talk to you about. Leanne has the details.
Well, here's an update on the Idaho rape case that made headlines during the 2016 presidential election. This was a case coming out of Twin Falls, Idaho, where 3 refugee boys raped, sexually assaulted a 5-year-old girl. Well, now those 3 refugees, aged 14, 10, and 7, have pled guilty to sexually assaulting that 5-year-old girl. Witnesses or people who actually heard the little girl's testimony reported that she was actually stripped naked. They urinated in her mouth, among other things that really tormented and violated this young girl. Her family says, you know, we agreed to these plea bargains, but that doesn't mean that they're satisfied. Of course, our daughter is going to be having to deal with some long-term drama of this vicious sexual assault. And a lot of people said that they were really trying to cover up this story because of how heated the arguments were during the 2016 election for the refugee programs that, of course, the left was trying to push. Now, we saw the Washington Post and other liberal news sources really try to throw cold water on the anger surrounding this assault. They were really focusing it on inaccuracies with people's reporting, like people said that these refugees were from Syria rather than from Iraq and Eritrea, where 2 of the boys were from. So they were really focused on that rather than the facts surrounding this case, which had so many people angered. Now, it was pulled into the political argument, of course, because of that refugee program. Chobani, whose factory employs many refugees, was another target of this anti-refugee anger. A lot of people say that the factory there and other local businesses are linked to the refugee program because the existence of the labor of these refugees is needed to fuel Chobani. So interestingly, while this story of these 3 refugee boys pleading guilty has received almost zero national attention, the the owner there of Chobani was giving a very glowing 60 Minutes interview where they praised him for being such a great jobs creator.
So the report from The Hill said that Breitbart at the time had said that this plant had brought not only refugees, but crime and tuberculosis. But of course, that was just fake news. Remember, when we heard the reports of that 5-year-old special needs girl who was raped, everybody said, oh, that's just fake news. That's false. But now, of course, we have seen them admit to sexually assaulting that 5-year-old girl, getting their plea deal done last week. And so now it's time for CBS's 60 Minutes to let's sweep all that under the carpet and let's revitalize the image of Chobani yogurt. And of course, they call it Greek yogurt, but this is a Turk, a billionaire who came here and set up these factories. It is the world's largest yogurt factory that's there in Idaho. And there's an interesting article going back to last August by Lee Stranahan in Breitbart at the time. And I talked to him as he was doing that investigation. There were environmental issues in the area due to that yogurt factory as well. Points out that it started in 2008. He began to hire refugees to work in the upstate New York plant. Listening to him speak at events like the Clinton Global Initiative and at Davos, you can tell that the issue closest to his heart is refugee resettlement. That was what he was bragging about on 60 Minutes yesterday. Now, he got an $800,000 Small Business Administration loan. And when I look at this, somebody that has that much money, somebody who is a foreign citizen still, I had small businesses. I never got $8 from the Small Business Administration. And of course, we've had people on as well talking about the fraud of the Small Business Administration. The fact that most of their money goes to very well politically connected individuals who have very large businesses, not small businesses. So this guy gets $800,000 loan from the Small Business Association. What does he do with it? Well, he spends $700,000 of it lobbying to get included in the lucrative lunchroom business. And of course, they're the main supplier of Greek yogurt for the federal school lunch system. And Michelle Obama said, we need to have more Greek yogurt, and we need specifically Greek yogurt. And we need to move away from these other foods that have traditionally been served in school lunchrooms. They say, of course, he has absolutely no problem greasing the wheels. He gave a lot of money to Chuck Schumer and the other senator from New York, Gillibrand. And he wanted to get into this school lunch program, which is $15 billion. One last data point about this foreign billionaire who gets $800,000 from the Small Business Association, then turns around and uses it to lobby these Democrat senators to get into the school lunch program and just snowball this. They say that he is on the board of the Federal Reserve in New York. This guy is still a Turkish citizen, but he's on the New York Fed, the most powerful of all the different Fed organizations. He's also been named an eminent advocate for the United Nations Refugee Agency. And in the original story we were looking at here from The Hill, they were saying that, he said, when these people get a job, now they're not refugees anymore. No, now they are independent, okay? But of course, it's Americans who are not getting those jobs, Americans who are not getting the loans from the Small Business Association. And how is this working out in other countries? We're going to take a look at what's going on in Germany as well as in Sweden. But yesterday we had in Egypt a Palm Sunday attack, 44 dead, more than 100 injured in church bombings carried out by ISIS in Egypt. Is this something that tears at your heartstrings? Have you seen the pictures of this? Now, it's just as horrific as the people who died of the gas, the chemical gas in Syria, but there's not been as much publicity about this. Egypt's president has called for a 3-month state of emergency after 44 people were killed and more than 100 more were injured in 2 suicide attacks at Coptic Christian churches. The first happened at St. George Church in a Nile Delta town. 27 people were killed, 78 others were wounded. A second explosion was by a suicide bomber who tried to storm St. Mark's Cathedral in Alexandria. That left 17 dead and 48 injured. And of course, in December, we had another church that was attacked in Cairo that killed about 30 people, mostly women. And there have also been a string of killings in the Sinai Peninsula that have caused hundreds of Christians to flee to safer areas of the country. Well, if it's going to be anything like in Syria like this, we will see that just like in other places the United States has taken over, in Iraq and elsewhere, There were large Christian populations that have completely disappeared after the United States got involved. Now, what is happening as these refugees in the countries that we foment war, that we create chaos, that we create terrorist organizations, fund and train them, as they then move into our countries? We're going to take a look at that in Sweden. But first, take a look at this article here from the Daily Caller. Germany moves to ban child marriages after finding 1,500 cases among refugees. They say the German government has agreed to a proposal on Wednesday to outlaw child marriages. The Central Register of Foreign Nationals has documented a surge in child marriages in recent years. As of July 2016, 1,500 minors were registered as married, including 361 under the age of 14, following the lead of Mohammed, aren't they? Yeah, these are the Islamic pedophile refugees. The largest group of child brides, 664 minors, comes from Syria, followed by Afghanistan and Iraq. They say there are frequently cases where a girl, usually between the ages of 13 and 15 years of age, suddenly no longer shows up to school. Then we find out that she's become married. Now, in Sweden, we see reports of people in the aftermath of that truck attack, which you didn't see much about because you saw all of the information that was happening in Syria, but you didn't see the Islamic jihadist who was attacking people with a truck in Sweden. You didn't see much news about that. One of the doctors who showed up on spot said it was terrible. I will never understand how they could do it. Of course, we will never understand their mindset. You can't understand the mindset. Nevertheless, the jihadi killer said, I am pleased with what I've done. I achieved what I set out to do. And he said this was in retaliation for action against ISIS. Not Assad, by the way, folks, against ISIS. And now they're saying, this is another article here that was actually an op-ed piece on the Daily Mail. The bastion of liberalism is now paying the price for its tolerance. Sue Reed, who writes the op-ed piece, says Sweden's generosity to those seeking refuge from war, poverty, or oppression has turned this into a feeding ground for terrorists because they don't understand their motivations. And the Prime Minister is saying Sweden will never go back to the days of mass immigration. Let's hope that that doesn't happen. Let's hope that they learn their lesson. Has the U.S. learned the lesson? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Alex Jones here with a very important news update to anybody out there that wants to be prepared. But it goes beyond being prepared. Our bodies absolutely must have the good halogen iodine or we will die. And you look at all of the thyroid problems and all the people that don't have energy and that have all sorts of hormone problems. And from my research and a lot of just mainline research, it leads back to iodine over and over and over again. It's as important as vitamin C. If you don't get iodine, you die. But most people are just deficient, so they're low energy, they're sick. You got to have iodine in your body so that your body can produce the hormones you need. It is the base to so many things. And since I got into iodine 4 years ago, we've helped change the entire paradigm by developing and bringing to the public deep earth crystals from 7,000 to 12,000 feet of the purest iodine available. Other iodine comes from the ocean or from other byproducts of chemical facilities, and it's tainted. It's bound. It's not absorbable. I tried it. And I had incredible effects even with dirty iodine because the body needs it. When you don't have iodine, it absorbs the chlorine, the fluoride, and all these other bad halogens. Do yourself and your family a favor and check out the importance of iodine for yourself. I think you're going to be blown away. And whatever you do, support the broadcast and get a bottle of Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2. Also consult your physician because if you've been deficient in it or have other issues, it can have some dramatic effects. As for me and most folks I talk to, it's been a game changer in the positive column, but still consult your physician because iodine is no joke. It's a key building block of the body. And if you haven't had it for a long time and suddenly have it, some folks say they've experienced things like a detoxing effect and things like that. You've got to have vitamin C. You've got to have iodine to live. You got to have water to live. Iodine is key. You must have it, but consult your physician first before you get powerful Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2 at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll free. We can answer your questions. 888-253-3139.
As Jared Kushner is consolidating his position of power and bringing in Goldman Sachs Democrats like Gary Cohen, we see some pushback in terms of parody. I want to take a look at some of the comedy that is based, some ad hominem comedy attacks that have come out. The Hill reports that White House staff was passing around an Onion article that was parodying Kushner. Of course, he's now being put in charge of the Middle East as well. So the Onion said that Jared Kushner was quietly transferring solve the Middle East crisis as a to-do list to next week's to-do list. They said ushering in lasting peace across the Middle East is definitely still a big priority for me, but given everything else that I've got going on right now, I'm just going to need to bump it to next week when I have a little bit more time on my hands. He acknowledged that he was just a bit too swamped at the moment with policy reports, real estate development meetings to resolve the numerous wars, land disputes, and centuries-old ethnic and religious tensions that have long raged among the 350 million residents of the geopolitical hotspot. Now, along those lines, we had some really hysterical pictures of Jared and one of his friends walking around in their khaki pants and their blazers wearing a bulletproof vest on the outside. And of course, the hashtag on that was hashtag Kushner at war. I just want to show you a couple of these here. People started posting these pictures and adding spins on movie titles. For example, putting the picture up and saying a Full Metal Jackass or Close Encounters of the Thurston Howell III kind, you know, the guy from Gilligan's Island, or The Douche of Hazard. Again, another one, G.I. Jared, or letters, Dearest Ivanka, War is Hell. None of the men here know how to prepare a Cosmo or the foie gras I procured. I may not survive. Another one, Saving Private Equity, or Zero Dork 30. In the Armani now, U.S. Air Force, H-A-E-I-R. And then there's this, Twits Krieg. You know, Leanne McAdoo has a report. You know, it looks like there may be a gag order, not an order to stop the gags, but an order to stop anybody talking about the influence of Kushner and Ivanka in the White House under Donald Trump. Is there a gag order at Breitbart to not talk about Jared Kushner?
Senior editors at Breitbart News have instructed their employees to stop writing any articles that are critical of Jared Kushner. Now, this is according to Business Insider. They say that people familiar with the matter spoke to them, and after the New York Times reported on the weekend that allies of Kushner had complained to President Trump about the negative coverage he was receiving from Breitbart News, we can see that they've sort of changed their tune with articles covering Kushner. They've kind of fell silent on the matter. Now, Kushner is, of course, President Trump's son-in-law. He's also a senior White House advisor. And there have been reports that there's been kind of a feud going on with him and the White House chief strategist, Stephen Bannon, who, of course, is the former executive chairman of Breitbart News. So one of the stories that Breitbart reported, they suggested that Kushner was leaking negative information about Stephen Bannon to the press. And another article ran down a list of some of the delicate problems that Trump has entrusted to his son-in-law Kushner, where they accurately note that he boasts a very thin resume in diplomacy. Now, that might be critical, but it's absolutely true. And this has a lot of people concerned because it seems as though Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump are playing a much more pivotal role in Trump's administration than anyone could have even predicted. And some of the things that President Trump has now entrusted with Jared, his portfolio, has grown to include everything from remaking American businesses and the VA to handling U.S. relations with Mexico and China to forging peace in the Middle East. That's right. And so, of course, on April 2nd, Jared actually flew to Iraq at the invitation of the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he met the ire of the internet because as he's out there, he wears a bulletproof vest over his sport coat in full preppy regalia. It actually sparked a hilarious Twitter hashtag where people are just making fun of him. And this just kind of goes to show the experience that he does not have in dealing with forging peace in the Middle East. Now, Dr. Steve Pachenik was on the Alex Jones show today, and he spoke about why he feels Donald Trump needs to let Jared Kushner know that he's fired.
I don't know Jared Kushner. I've seen the best of him. He comes out of a family that was involved in real estate. He's involved in real estate. His father was indicted and convicted. The problem is they have some major properties in Manhattan. One in particular, which I know very well, is 666 Fifth Avenue. Billions of dollars have been foreclosed upon on the Kushner family, and they can't refinance that property. All it takes in the business of real estate, believe me, I know this very well, is for one major property to go under for billions of dollars, and then it starts to be a domino effect. Kushner is a highly vulnerable target for the Chinese, for the Russians, and any foreign individuals because their family was doing private business with the Chinese. It's the Chinese who came in and told them, we'll take care of you. Now, he can resign if he wants. He can do whatever he wants. Nevertheless, from a counterintelligence point of view, Kushner and many of those civilians there are really prime targets for foreign governments in terms of manipulation and leveraging. And if I were Jared Kushner, I would leave the White House and do the best thing he could, just say to America, thank you very much, and go back to his real estate business. Otherwise, he becomes a liability. And that liability as a civilian, it doesn't matter whether he's a son-in-law or not, becomes a great liability.
There is a serious issue with the rise of Jared and Ivanka in terms of their influence at the White House. And a good example of this is this article from Axios talking about how Trump is planning a centrist push, and Priebus is on board. Bannon may not be, and if he's not, he will be pushed out, because they said there's this changing culture here. They said it's changing from nationalist versus globalist to combat versus collaboration. In other words, if you were going to push back against the changes that are happening very rapidly in the Trump White House, then you're going to be pushed out. If you take a combative approach, you have to become a collaborator with the Goldman Sachs globalists. And we've seen this. We've seen Jared Kushner bring in the Obamacare architect, Zeke Emanuel, brother of Rahm Emanuel, multiple times. The guy who was adamant that Obamacare would not be repealed. And even though we've seen wonderful moves at the beginning of the Trump administration against the TPP, we've now seen Gary Cohen bringing in the architect of the TPP to push back against NAFTA. On climate change, we saw Donald Trump bring in a very combative attorney general who had pushed back against the EPA's legal overreach. And we had some great moves to stop this overreach by the EPA. And yet, when it came to the Paris Climate Treaty and that executive action, we hear that Ivanka pushed very hard for that not to be talked about, or the endangerment clause to not be shut down. So if you leave these structures there, just like Obamacare, then that is the dangerous thing. And that is the globalist approach that is there. So how is this all being shaken up? Well, we see another person being taken out of the National Security Council. Of course, we lost first General Flynn, then we lost Steve Bannon last week. Now we see K.T. McFarland, who was brought in by General Flynn. She has now been pushed out by McMaster. They say that he was given, of course, by Donald Trump. This is the Daily Caller. McMaster was given the authority to restructure the National Security Council to suit his particular needs. Reports circulating in February suggested that McFarland might leave. However, she told The Hill at that time that she would stay on. She said, I just met with the president. He asked me to stay on. I'm thrilled to do so. However, now we see that she is leaving just a couple of months later. So she's being pushed out. Gary Cohen, again, who brought in the architect of TPP to push back against any reform of NAFTA, is being talked about as the new candidate for chief of staff. And then as K.T. McFarland is leaving, we're seeing someone else take her place, Dinah Habib Powell, an Egyptian who came here at the age of 4. She speaks Egyptian. And, of course, she was brought in first as Ivanka Trump's advisor, telling her how to navigate in Washington, as they talked about in Fortune magazine. She was the incoming first daughter's partner with Diana Powell, so she was going to fine-tune her powerful new role. Well, as they say, she was the go-to person on women's issues. Now she is going to be advising Donald Trump on national security. And back when she was advising her on women's issues, the Washington Post said, well, we love her positions on issues. The only problem is they're not Donald Trump's positions. They're Hillary Clinton's positions. And that's what we're seeing in national security, in foreign policy, and economic and trade issues as the Goldman Sachs people take over. Well, that's it for tonight's news. Join us again tomorrow night at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
I am very proud to announce the introduction of the highest quality InfoWars Biome Defense Probiotic. We wanted to come out with the largest spectrum of high quality known probiotics that have been proven to improve overall digestion and health and detoxification in the body. Biome Defense is an exclusive blend of 50 billion live and active cultures from over 23 different probiotic strains that are known to support digestion and intestinal function. Our researchers are confident that we have been able to develop what will be the leading probiotic on the market. Secure your Biome Defense in ultra strength or regular strength at InfoWarsLife.com today and get started supporting your digestive system naturally. We've been testing this formula for years, but this is the limited first run to the public, so please take advantage of it today. Support your own health and support the InfoWar.
Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, April 10th, 2017. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, the Syria missile strike fallout continues to